It's a truly glorious bank holiday Monday here in the UK, and today I'm going to be going back to ranting about one of my favourite subjects, also the one that gets me the most abuse in the comments. I'm going to be talking about Flat Earth, because the Flat Earthers have got a new celebrity spokesman. Former boxing world champion Carl Froch, I don't know how you pronounce his name, has said there is no evidence that the Earth is round and all we see is CGI trickery from NASA. It's always NASA, isn't it? It's never the Russians or the Indians or the Chinese or the Brits, always the Americans. One of the most common problems that Flat Earthers have is that every credible scientist says the world is round, whereas their new spokesman, and don't get me wrong, boxing is a good and noble art, but this is a man who earned a living getting punched in the head. And he's not the only British sportsman in the Flat Earth camp. Former England cricketer Freddie Flintoff is on record in saying that the world is flat. The thing is that since retiring from professional cricket, Freddie Flintoff has gone on numerous panel shows and never misses an opportunity to prove that he's thick as shit. He uses the name Freddie, which is an abbreviation of Frederick, but his first name is Andrew. Also, I think he's now a presenter on Top Gear. But since Clarkson, Hammond and May left, no one watches it. Top Gear is the deadest horse which the BBC continues to flog. Flintoff supports his argument that the Earth is flat and therefore cannot be rotating at 1,000 miles an hour, with two classic Flat Earther arguments. The first being that all the water in the seas and lakes would be thrown off the Earth's surface, and secondly, that a helicopter would just have to hover and the Earth would rotate underneath it. Now, using that logic, you would expect that if you stood up on board an airliner, you'd be hurled violently towards the back of the plane. Or that if you were driving your car at 70 miles an hour and dropped something, it would fly into the back seat. But that doesn't happen. And it couldn't be any more bloody simple. The reason that this happens is that the air inside the vehicles is moving at the same speed as the vehicle, and that's what's fucking happening on Earth as well. The Earth, the air, the whole atmosphere is all turning at the same rate. So when a helicopter hovers, the air it's hovering in is still rotating at the same speed as the Earth. In effect, it is standing still. Another argument often put forward by Flat Earthers is that airliners would have to constantly dip their nose to take into account the curvature of the Earth. But that doesn't work either. Once an airliner gets to its cruising altitude, it just has to remain at that altitude. In the same way that if you're driving a car in a circle, you just get to the right trajectory and hold the wheel there. You don't have to constantly adjust. The difference is that going around the world, the roundabout in effect is 25,000 fucking miles round. But when it comes to talking about air travel, there's one thing that Flat Earthers always omit. Now, if you're flying from London to San Francisco, you would expect the flight time to be the same on a flat Earth flying from San Francisco to London. It's the same distance. But actually, there's a difference of 1 hour and 3/4. And that's because in one direction, the aircraft is assisted by the jet stream, super high speed winds up near the top of the atmosphere. And the jet stream is generated by the inertia coming from the Earth's rotation. So where did the idea that we live on a flat Earth come from? Now, online, Flat Earthers often put up illustrations saying that every civilization before the dawn of NASA thought the Earth was flat. But that's not the case. The Flat Earthers' nemesis, NASA, only came into being in the 1950s. But in around 600 BC, Pythagoras calculated that the Earth was a sphere, and 200 years later, Aristotle backed him up. The Greeks, the Romans, the Saxons, the Vikings all knew that the world was round. In fact, by the year 1400, the entire Western world knew we were living on a sphere. Then roll forward a few hundred years and you've got the likes of Copernicus and Galileo confirming that we rotate around the sun, not the other way round. And everyone knew this. Flat Earth only emerged in the mid-1800s. In the 19th century, science suddenly changes gear. Building on hundreds of years of knowledge, experiments become much more complicated. Too complex for the average man or woman in the street to comprehend. So science was now no longer something we could just experience with our own senses. There were more powerful telescopes, more complex machinery. And in effect, people were told something was true because intelligent scientists said it was true. And for one man from Cambridgeshire, enough was enough and Flat Earth was born. This man was an inventor called Samuel Rowbotham, although his published works were written under the pseudonym Parallax! The name Parallax sounds like he's a villain in a Marvel film, and not one of the good ones. He took 2 barges. On one he placed a flag and sent it 6 miles down a canal. On the other he placed a telescope, his reasoning being that if the Earth is curved, he shouldn't be able to see the flag from 6 miles away. And when he looked through the telescope, he could still see the flag. The Earth wasn't curved, the myth of the flat Earth had begun. But he hadn't taken into account that light refracts. The natural world doesn't behave the way it should do on paper. In effect, Parallax cherry-picked the bits of information which supported his argument and then added a fuck-ton of confirmation bias. And I'm sure he'd be proud to know that every flat earther carries on that tradition. Another thing that flat earthers often fall back on when they argue that everyone used to think the world was flat, it's a rather strange story most of us learn in primary school. As young children, we were told that Christopher Columbus found America whilst trying to prove that the Earth was round and that no one else believed him. That's utter bullshit. He was trying a different navigational route and slammed into the USA, roughly 600 years after the Vikings had been there. So the idea that the Earth is flat is actually well under 200 years old. And I think it's good that there are people who don't just accept the things they've been told. But with flat earthers, they don't accept the things they can't understand. They can't see gravity, ergo it must not exist. They haven't seen the curvature of the Earth, therefore it must be a conspiracy by some dark and shady organisation. They claim the rest of us are brainwashed, that we are sheeple, whilst they carry out their extensive research at 3 AM on YouTube. It's worth remembering that all flat earthers are conspiracy theorists, and conspiracy theorists generally have high levels of paranoia and narcissism. They believe they are more intelligent than everyone else, and also that they know the truth. They know what goes on behind the government, the truth which would blow the minds of us mere mortals. And they demonstrate their huge intelligence by recording their experiments and putting them online. And all of these experiments can be shown to be flawed by a retarded 6-year-old. There are few things worse than an idiot who thinks he's intelligent. Also, to be a flat earther, in fact to be any conspiracy theorist worth your salt, you must be able to massively misquote 1984 by George Orwell. All conspiracy theorists love referring to Orwell's dystopian masterpiece, and for flat earthers they'll say that the capitalist system and NASA are like Big Brother, misinforming the public and oppressing us. And what they fail to realise is that 1984 is a book about communism. If you are a flat earther and you're planning to leave a long and abusive response in the comments, please firstly check your spelling, because a lot of flat earthers are borderline illiterate, and secondly be aware it takes you much longer to type it than it does for me to delete it.